Moses Price in the house, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. What's up, Nosy?
Hey, how y'all out there doing there, man? This is Moses, man. Moses Price. You know, they used to call me years ago, say Moses Price eat billy goat rice. I don't even know what billy goat rice is. But whatever, why they call me that, I don't know. But what I'm here to do today, just tell you a little something about me. I ain't nobody special. Like I grew up down south. Like many of us. I did all kind of weird things there. When I was living in Key West, I used to go out in a little tube in a little boat, and I would dive up conchs. You know what conchs is? People make conch fritters and stuff like that, conch salad and all that. So I used to do that, man, and I used to sell them, and sell the shells too. But then later on in life, I moved up to Georgia there, with my grandmother, which was, boy, that was something else. Because,
Where was that grandmother live?
my grandmother was living in Camilla, Georgia, a little small town. You can take a baseball and throw it, and you throw it all the way through the town. But there I was introduced to the cotton fields and the watermelon fields, and wow, man, I used to go there and I used to pick watermelons, and I don't know how I made it, and we only got $2 or $3 a day, but I made it, and time was pretty tough up there in Georgia. I hear people today talking about a free lunch program. Well, we didn't have no free lunch program over there. I'm going back in the 50s now, 58, 59. And there wasn't no free lunch program. And all it cost was a quarter. Man, I didn't even have a quarter to eat in the lunchroom. Now, if you was lucky, if you had $1, you can eat for 5 days for $1. But I didn't have the $5. But anyway, I got by. So, I had a little job, and I did little things around, helping people, cleaning their yards, and made me a few dollars. And so then I got a car when I was 17 years old. Of course, it wasn't no good car, it was stopping. It probably was parked in the yard more than I was driving. So, but I would still go out, but I get stuck. And I would take friends and we'd go ride, but then we'd stop. Couldn't go nowhere. So then they gave me a nickname. They started calling me Speedball. Well, Speedball, wow, man. His car is just like a speedball. It ain't going nowhere. Well, anyway, I got rid of that. So later on, I was lucky. I found another old used car. It was a 55 Ford. Ragged as hell. But I rode. We got around. Matter of fact, that would take me places. It was smoking and everything. It would take me places. But I remember, I started, there was a band, very good band down there, local band. They got themselves together. So my car was the transportation for them to get to some of the places that was playing. But the places they was playing was like juke joints. But, the guys made a few dollars. The way it worked back in those days, like when the band come in there, the house man have to get him like $100 or something like that. And then on the door, they split it, whatever they got on the door. So that's how they made money. So they did okay. Now, after I got out of high school, I came to New York City. Caught a ride.
Big city.
Caught a ride with some people, They said, hey, man, we need somebody to help us drive to New York. So my grandmother was around, and I said, Mama, you mind? She said, no. So I went to New York. I drove these people up to New York. So when I got to New York, the lady, very nice lady, she said, was pay me. She said, here's whatever the money, I told you I was going to pay you. And then I'm going to get you a ticket back home. Now, I could have been slick. I didn't do that. I said, no. I said, Miss Maggie, I said, can I stay here for a little while? She said, I want to call your grandmother. She called my grandmother up. And my grandmother said, oh, yeah, he can stay because there ain't nothing in Georgia for him to do. So I stayed with Miss Maggie for a while. I said, Miss Maggie, just let me stick around here and try to find me a little job. And she said, go ahead. So I went out and I found a job. I've always been somewhat discriminatory about my jobs that I get. Well, one of the first jobs I got, I was working in a factory. And I only worked in that factory for 1 week. A week and a half, really. The factory was just, you never stop. It's just boom, 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 boom. You go in there, boom, 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 boom. And, I was a fast worker. So I would, I would kind of like be ahead of everybody else. As soon as the supervisor saw me, I'm heading, I'm just waiting on the other materials to come through. He had me to go out and help other people. And this is my job right here as a material handler, what they used to call it. I used to put the stuff in the acid and so forth and so on and put it in the oven and bake it. So one day the guy came in and, man, I was still working, pulling my stuff down. He said, oh, you don't call it good. So I told the guy, I said, look, man, they hired me to be a material handler. They didn't hire me to help everybody else out. Oh, well, you got to do this. So the next day he did the same thing. I said, look, man, I said, I'm not going to help anybody else. I'm doing my job. So I went in there to the guy, the boss, the manager of the company, and I said, hey, man, I said, this supervisor out here keep bothering me. I said, I'm doing my work. When I, do what I'm supposed to do, I'm caught up, I'm doing okay. Now he want me to go help other people. I says, I'm not going to do that. You didn't hire me to work to do the whole factory. You hired me to be a material handler. And a lot of you people who work in a factory know what material handling is. So next day the guy had me doing the same thing. So I told the guy, I said, if he do that again, I said, I'm quitting. I said, so look, can I get my money today? He said, no. He said, no, I talked to him. He said, no, I talked to him. So I said, okay. I said, well, tell the guy that, I don't mind working here, but I'm going to do my job. Well, he said, I'm going to talk. He talked to the guy, so he said. Next day I'm out there. So I'll catch up. So now I'm chilling, waiting on some more stuff to come. The supervisor come over there and say, hey, man, help that guy. Get a broom, help sweeping up. I said, no, man. I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, I'm a material handler. So I went in there to the office, to the general manager, and I said, you know something? I said, I want my check today. I said, I'm leaving here. I said, I ain't working here no more. So he said, well, no, man. He said, we can't give you the check today. You got to work 1 week and save the other check. I said, well, when can I get paid? He said, you can get paid next week. I said, okay, I need my money now, but I'm leaving. So I left that factory. And I said to myself, just like when I left from down south, I can't go to the field no more. I'm not a strong guy. I'm not able to do that kind of hard work. So I left the factory. But then I think that was one of the best deals that I got, which I left it after a month and a half. And back in those days, man, it was hard to get city jobs. And some guys that I met, they knew people and everything. You had to know people to work on the garbage truck. So, I mean, I got a job on the New York City Sanitation Department, not the private, but the city. Man, that was one of the best damn jobs I had. I mean, it looked hard, but we used to be working hard. I didn't mind that because we used to go out there. They had a system. You had a route, and you 5 streets this way and 5 streets that way and so forth. Now, when you finished with your 5 or 6 streets that way, you was finished for the day. So if it took you 4 hours, 6 hours, you got paid for 8 hours. Now, if they ask you, say, okay, man, y'all finished, can you help somebody else? Well, that's overtime. So I worked there, and the pay was good. Matter of fact, I'm quite sure it's the same way, maybe better today. Why would a crazy man like me from Georgia, worked in a factory, leave one of the highest paid city jobs that was in New York City was the sanitation? The sanitation department back then was making more than the police department and the social workers when they started. And I quit that job. Okay, that's New York. So I'm still living out on the island with the lady that brought me up in, friends. And so I got tired of being out on Long Island because, Long Island reminded me of where I came from, down south, no diversity, everybody getting fighting and cutting the fool every weekend in this place. They're going to know what I'm talking about. There's a place over there called Roslyn, New York. Back in the 60s, a lot of the girls used to come from down south who used to work, as domestic people, the ladies cleaning, take care of kids and stuff. But they had a sleep-in job. But on Thursdays, that was their day off, Thursdays and Sundays, I believe. And they would go out to Roslyn and everybody would go meet the girls, and we have a good time. But there was a lot of fights, a lot of whatever it is. So I didn't want to hang there. So I told some of the guys, I said, hey, man, let's go to Manhattan and check that out. You know what they told me? Man, you don't want to go to Manhattan, man. Them people are violent over there. They'll kill you. So I hadn't been here. I done came from down south. And I didn't even pass it. I saw the buildings from afar. I hadn't seen the big buildings. So one day we was going back to Queens, and we passed through Jamaica, and I saw well, it was the L. Well, it's Subway, but the thing, it was the L that go. It was in Queens. A lot of the places, the Subway is up on the air, and if they up in the air, and if they up in the air, they call them the L. So I said, hey man, I said, what is that? He said, oh man, this is Subway. I said, well, where does it go? They said, oh, that go to New York. I said, where? You talking about New York where the buildings at? I said, oh yeah. I said, well, y'all let me out right here. So I got out of the car, man, and I went upstairs. I didn't know where in the hell I was going. I got on the subway. Well, the subway just kept going, going down toward New York. So I asked the people, I was on the subway for a while. I didn't know when I was going to get to New York. I'm glad I asked the guy. I said, well, I said, is this train going to New York? He said, yeah, it's going to New York. He said, but where you going? I said, I don't know. I'm just going, I want to go to Manhattan and see. So he said, well, look, man, he said, you know what you want to do? He said, you want to, when you get to Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, and you people know about it. He said, you go downstairs and you get the A train. And you take that take you right down to everywhere in New York, Times Square, so forth and so on. So I said, okay. So I went down, I stayed on the train for another 10 or 15 minutes, got down to the Eastern Parkway, got down, went down, now I'm really scared now, because now you're underground. So now I go down the Eastern Parkway and get on the subway, and now I'm underground. I said, oh, wow. So I'm still looking for New York City. So boy, that train rode for about a half an hour. I didn't see nothing because I'm underground. So I said, well, damn, man. I said, I wonder when I'm going to get to New York. So I let the train go a little bit further. So then the train got, I still didn't see nothing. So I asked the guy, I said, is this Manhattan here yet? He said, oh, yeah, this is 34th and whatever street. I said, well, this is really New York where them buildings at? He said, yeah. I goes upstairs, man. I look and I see all of these big old buildings in New York, man, big old skyscrapers. I said, oh, yeah, I'm in New York. That's what I was coming here for. I was coming here to deal with these big buildings, and not Queens out there where it looked like Georgia. So I goes up there. I said, wow, man, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was just walking around, and everything. And then I walked up to 42nd Street where the bus station was at, because people always say if you go to the bus station, you know where you're going. So I walked up to 42nd Street, and then I turned and walked down. And now, look, boy, I see this big old Broadway. I see everything. I said, yeah, I'm in New York now. This is all right. So I walked down, and I was seeing some of the clubs. People was doing their thing and whatever it is. And I said, it's pretty cool. And I saw there was, I can't think of the club name, but it was famous. They used to have this drummer. He used to play, Gene Krupa. Gene Krupa was playing. He was the big drummer. So I see him in there, and I thought he was a good drummer because he used to make the drums say croop, 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 croop. So I hung there for a while, and that was a good place to go. So now I go back to Queens. I said, now I know where to go. It wasn't no big deal. It wasn't, dancing or anything like that. But I said, I just want to go and see New York. So now the next time I get on the train, I know what I'm doing now. So I'm riding on the train. I'm riding on the A train, call myself going up to 34th Street and everything. So I look at all these weird people, blacks, and it was diverse. Black guys with white girls with black men, everybody integrated. And they all looked weird, the hair was there, and they had them big old bell bottom pants and everything.
What year was this?
It was back in 64.
Oh, Afro was out back
then. Yeah,
then.
everything was out. So I said to myself, I said, well, this must be a good place. I got off the train right there on West 4th Street. I didn't know anything about a Greenwich Village, but that was the village, Greenwich Village. So I got off, walked up the stairs there, man, saw all of these people, man. Man, everybody is completely diverse. Everybody was just having a good time. So I went to a couple of little bars down there. Back then, they didn't have that many discos. They had these Cafe A Go-Go and Whiskey A Go-Go, and, you go in there and drink coffee and do your thing. So I said, oh, this is pretty cool, and everything. So I said, okay, well, after a certain time of night, I goes back to Queens again. Now I said, oh, man, that New York, man, is not bad. I said, especially down there in the village. So then the next day, I got a job. I went to Manhattan looking for me a job. I found a job at Saks Fifth Avenue. Hardest job damn near I ever had. I was in the stock department, where you move shoes and clothes and all that around. So when I got to Saks Fifth Avenue, I worked there for about when I was at Saks Fifth Avenue, I met up with another guy, a friend, who was pretty cool. We got a room together. We got a room with 2 beds in there and a kitchenette. we got that together over in Manhattan. So now I goes back over to Queens, and I tell my people that I said, hey, look, I said, I'm moving to Manhattan. And they said, oh, man, it's dangerous over there. I said, well, like, I'm going over there. So now I goes to Manhattan, get my room. So my man there, Daniel, real good friend, a brother. So we stayed together for a little while. But he went into the army and went to Vietnam. So now here I am here, you know, I got to pay whatever it is, $30 or $40 a month. So, but then I went to a nightclub, a disco there, but it was a college disco town, and boy, these people was having a good time in that school. That's why I tell you, young people, you listen to just about anything people tell you. Now, whether it's the truth or not, but investigate it. So I met up with some folks there, and just about everybody in this club, you know, had their little New York University jackets, and most of them was college students. Well, I didn't have nothing going for myself. So I met up with a guy, and he says where he was going to school, and he said, "Man, I'm going to Fashion Institute." It was a community college at that time. I said, "Well, you know," I says, "How much you pay to go there?" He said, "Oh man, I don't pay anything." He says, "You know, if you go to City College, you don't have to pay because you know, but that's not a part of the city university, but it's like a state type school. But if you don't have any money or whatever it is, you can get into the program." So I said, "Oh, well, I'm going there because I wasn't really thinking about all of this." So I went there, and hey, man, the people accepted me in the Fashion Institute. And I went there, and when I was living down south, my mother bought me a camera. And we used to call them a picture taker back in those days. Y'all know what I'm talking about, a picture taker. You know, we all got an answer for all kind of things. So I went there, boy, they had all these cameras and all these kind of things. I said, "Oh, that's going to be cool." And then I was saying to myself, I said, now, because when I was getting into a skill or trade, I always wanted to find out how I'm going to make some damn money. And I always liked the photography. But there was a photographer in my town, Camilla, Georgia. He had a little small studio, and his name was Mr. Broadwater. And people, I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people who came downtown with their girlfriends, they'll go to Mr. Broadwater's studio, and he'll take their picture. So I said, "Oh, wow." I said, you know, so, I mean, hey, now I see all these big old cameras in there. I had a little Kodak picture tape. So I learned a little bit about photography. So now, once I got into the photography thing there, you know, in New York, I knew that in my head, I know how to do things. When I say do things, I know what people like. So when I used to go to a lot of the clubs, I used to see the people with the Polaroids, right? Now, I'm at Fashion. So we taking pictures, but they also teaching us how to develop the pictures and how to blow them up and all this kind of stuff. And I know people love big things, right? So you know what I started doing? Well, I was making some decent money. When I go to the clubs, I bring my camera, my real professional 35 millimeter camera, and I'll see a couple. And I know they hang out in the disco or whatever it is all the time. "Hey, man, you want me to get a picture?" They say, "Yeah, man." They said, "How much it going to cost?" I said, "I don't know yet." I said, "It costs anywhere from $5 to $15. I said, you take your pick. I said, "But anyway, you know, let me get your picture. You'll probably be back here next week." Well, anyway, listen, I used to go in there and take at least 8 or 9 pictures of people, you know, couples or whatever it is, right? And I went back to Fashion Institute. And when I went into the lab, you know, like you had to buy your own paper. The paper wasn't that bad, $14, whatever. I don't know how many sheets, maybe 20 or 30 sheets. Now with a 11 by 14, I'm going back close to 50 years ago. I was getting $15 for a poster size. You know why? Because when I brought them back to the club, the people thought I was going to bring them a Polaroid camera, a Polaroid picture, right? And I brought them this 1114 back there and showed it to them. They almost kissed me, okay? And they said, "What you want?" And, you know, people always say, "I ain't got no money." I said, "Man, they're going to be $14 because it's a poster." I said, "You can be like, y'all go home and y'all spend all this money for Michael Jackson and all these people to be on your wall. How would you like to see you and your girlfriend on the wall looking like that?" The bottom line, back in those days, if you wanted to go to school anywhere, but if you went to the university like City College and those places, you had to have an A average to go there, and you go there free. You didn't have to pay. Now some of the other schools, I'm talking about the ones at the city and like Fashion and a few more other ones. Whatever you can afford, whatever it is, you know, and they wasn't bothering people, and I believe it's still the same way today. So they actually helped me, you know, in a way. So I didn't have to pay a lot of money to go there. But at any rate, when I after the still photography, now these people really scared the hell out of me now. They said, okay, the next course we're going to get into motion pictures, movies, cameras, and stuff like that. I said, oh, that sounds cool, but I never thought of being a movie cameraman. I mean, I never thought of that because, I knew I couldn't do that because a roll of 16 millimeter film back then cost you $12 or $13. I'm telling you again, I'm going back almost 50 years ago. So anyway, the school furnished that. They had all the stuff. So we went out and we started doing stuff. And I'm going to tell you, to this day, for you photographers out there, you know who I'm talking about. This guy, he's dead now, and I didn't know he had died a couple of years ago. His name was Bruce Harding. Bruce Harding is the one that really got me serious about photography and told me that I could do it and it wasn't no big deal. Because when you was doing films, motion pictures, they send you out with an assignment and they tell you whatever to do, and you got to go out and do it. Now, and these were some funny classes. I'm gonna tell you why they was funny, and this is why I know this today. It was terrible because it was like a workshop. Even if you did a good job or you did something bad, man, you should have moved the camera, you should have did that. Well, at any rate, I was so frustrated, and I should have stayed in my still photography, but So Bruce Harding came in here one day. I was there. I said, man, this film thing is too complicated. I said, I'm going to have to get out of here. He said, man, you're not going anywhere. He said, you can do it, and you're going to do it. And he said, I done already told you, there's one thing about photography and filmmaking, still photography. You don't have to say a word. Your work speaks for itself. And you take that darn camera and you be talented. There's two things you have to know, three things that you have to know about when you're first using the camera. Wide shot, medium shot, and long shot. You got to know when you want to see a big old picture, that's a wide shot. You know when you want to see it like 3 or 4 people in the shot, that's a medium shot. If you know you want to get close on the thing, that's the telephoto. So these are the things that, basic little things, and you're going to pick up other things. Now, you can also eyeball stuff. I don't encourage it, Moses, but if it's not really bright outside and the sun is shining a little bit, you're going to get a beautiful picture. And you photographers out there who usually do film, you know what I'm talking about. If you outside and the sun is a little bright or whatever it is, 4, 5, 5, 6, you're not going to miss. Now, if the sun is bright, you got to step back again, because if you go up to 16, the exposure is going to be okay, but you're going to see some darkness. So you always, this is without the light meter. Now, I know how to use that too. You take it out and do this and everything. But see, sometimes you ain't got time to do no light meter. Sometimes you got to eyeball it. You know what I'm saying? Because I remember when we was going out even shooting film, and we had to do it inside. And we had gotten used to it. Well, I haven't got used to the camera now, so I know what I'm doing. I just know what I'm doing now. I think so, anyway. So other people who would be out shooting, they'll come up and they'll go up and get their not white balance, but they'll go up and check out their, damn, I'm getting old now. You know what I'm talking about, the meter. I said, hey, what you got? Oh, I got 4 or 5. What you got? 5, 6. I looked down there at the thing like that, and I said, no, I believe it's about 5. Okay, so you have to learn these little techniques. Now, if you're doing a commercial or something, now you want to really get your lights, and you want to get your light meter, and you want to just light everything up. Shoot like if you were shooting at a TV station or what have you, and they were showing you how to do that. They showed me how to do it and everything, so I'm going to have to cut this. But at any rate, when I graduated from that school, I got a job, and I got a job here in Connecticut, and that's how I got into TV, working here at Channel 30 for over 40 years and retired in 2009, but still out here got me a YouTube channel doing my thing. So I hope y'all learned something from me today.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.